I sentence you to death, Claudius, in the most beautiful possible way. I sentence you to death, Claudius, in the most beautiful possible way. I, Claudius, will tell you how to frame your laws. Profiteering and bribery will stop. This Senate will function only in the name of Roman justice, and all of you who have acquired office dishonestly will be replaced by men who love Rome better than their purses.
126, take 6.
He claims the full moon will see my death. If he's wrong, I'll have him killed. If he's right, I'll take him with me. I can use a clever old vulture like that, even in death.
68, take 8.
My first act as God shall be one of clemency. I sent for you because I wish to put an end to your career as an historian. You might write something I didn't like, but we shall postpone your death until tomorrow.
Charles Laughton, Flora Robson, Emily Williams, in a film that was made 28 years ago. And this is the first time it's ever been shown. Since 1937, it's been lying in tins, collecting dust in the film vaults, forgotten. It was the first time that anyone had tried to turn Robert Graves's book into a film. But it was an ill-fated attempt, and it was abandoned after only a few weeks' shooting. But it was such a sensation at the time, and the mystery surrounding it was so intriguing, that we thought you might like to know the inside story. But getting the inside story hasn't been easy. All the records have either been destroyed or lost, and so getting the facts has involved a lot of patient detective work, tracking down people who worked on it, those of them who are still alive anyway, to find out what really happened. But the story begins, in more ways than one, with Robert Graves in New York.
Well, really, the whole story starts with the appearance in my life of the Emperor Claudius. And that was in about October 1929, just before I emigrated to Majorca, where I've been living ever since. And I noted in my diary, I used to keep a sort of commonplace book in those days, I no longer do, that I'd been reading the story of Claudius in Suetonius and Tacitus, and I knew there was a mistake somewhere, and that one day I'd write the real story, if I ever needed the money. I actually said it in those words. Well, then I went to Majorca, and after about 5 years, money started running out, and I got caught in a very big land deal. And I found that I had to make £8,000. I had to make £4,000. I regard this as a very personal affair between me and Claudius. So the book came out, and I made £8,000. So I was able to take the mortgage off my house and able to think about things again.
One person who read the book shortly after it came out was someone I later got to know, the late Sir Alexander Korda. Korda at this time, and this was the early 1930s, realized, like everyone else did, that there was no hope for the British film industry as long as Hollywood continued to dominate the world market. Production companies had long ago given up the unequal struggle and were reduced to turning out inferior little pictures as quickly and as cheaply as possible to meet the government quota, hence the rather disparaging label quota quickies. Well, against all odds, Korda made up his mind to fight a lone battle and make a prestige picture which would challenge the best of Hollywood. He decided to concentrate on historical subjects, on a budget which even then was absurdly small. He produced and directed The Private Life of Henry VIII with Charles Laughton. It was a fantastic success and made a fortune. And even more amazing, it caused a sensation in America. He followed this up with more lavish productions like Catherine the Great, The Scarlet Pimpernel, Fire Over England with Laurence Olivier and Flora Robson, Rembrandt with Charles Laughton and Gertrude Lawrence. And then he looked around for something even more ambitious, something that would really shake the cinema world, an epic to dwarf all epics. I, Claudius, seemed the perfect subject. He still had Laughton under contract. Now here was a story of murder, lust, and intrigue on the grand scale, a violent struggle for power with ancient Rome as its spectacular setting. He cabled Robert Graves.
Well, I didn't, I thought that was over, and then one day I got this cable from Korda that he wanted to buy the rights. So I thought, fine. Korda was a remarkably good chap. He was cynical, but he was real. His only failing, if I may call it so, was making himself a centre of expatriate Hungarians and really filling up the studios with Hungarians who were not altogether qualified for the jobs which he gave them, especially in the English department.
Turning the book into a film script was obviously going to be a difficult task. In one's innocence, one might be tempted to think that the best man to do it was Graves himself.
I was eventually shown a bit of some sort of script in which a character comes in, I think Caligula comes in and says, "My armies are revolting," which is seemed rather odd use of English. There's a lot of revolting in the script besides. I don't know who wrote it. There's a character called Biero was somehow concerned, another Hungarian, and it was. I was allowed, even given money to write a script, which I did, but of course that was filed somewhere.
Another surprising thing was that Korda, for various reasons, had no intention of directing the epic himself. Instead, he turned to a friend of his from Hollywood, a man who was already something of a legend, the great Joseph von Sternberg, the man who discovered Marlene Dietrich and directed the film that made her famous, The Blue Angel. Today, Sternberg lectures in the Department of Theater Arts in the University of California, Los Angeles.
30 years is, almost 30 years is a long time to remember. But I recall very definitely that I had an engagement with, I was in a nursing home, and I had an engagement with Louise Atwill and Mrs. Wallace Simpson. And that it was the afternoon when she had to leave England, and Alex Korda came instead and told me that the appointment was off, and brought to me 2 books by Robert Graves, and told me that he wanted me to direct Laughton in Claudius. I asked him why, and he told me that he was no longer able to direct Laughton, and that I should take over the direction of this work, which I read. There were 2 books by Robert Graves, and I thought they were magnificent material. He, the next day, Laughton himself came, brought me some grapes, and asked me to direct him. Laughton and Oberon had been cast by Corder, and I had no control over that. And I went to work and designed the costumes and chose the other members of the cast, who were Flora Robeson and Emlyn Williams, a very bright young man, and Ralph Richardson and Robert Newton and some other distinguished members of the acting fraternity.
So now the cast included Merle Oberon, Flora Robson, and Emlyn Williams. Robert Newton, alas, is no longer alive. And when we asked Ralph Richardson what he remembered about it, he said, nothing. I was never in the cast. But at the same time that Sternberg was talking to us, Merle Oberon was at her home in Beverly Hills. She has her own version of how and why Corder wanted to make I, Claudius.
I was Alex's only star at the time, under contract to him, I mean. I had done not very much. I was very young, but they'd all been very successful. Henry VIII, The Scarlet Pimpernel, Don Juan, and then The Dark Angel with Sam Goldwyn in America, which was a very big success. And I think Alex wanted to really make me the big star. And so he bought I, Claudius, and cast Charles Laughton as Claudius and Messalina for me. And then Alex decided that he would get von Sternberg to direct me, because von Sternberg was a woman's director. He just wanted to give me everything he could to make me shine.
She was to be a beautiful 15-year-old virgin, forced to marry her 50-year-old cousin Claudius, this stumbling, stuttering object of ridicule. Messalina, who then degenerates into a depraved liberty and whose name has become a byword for immorality. But extraordinarily difficult part which any leading actress would have given their eye teeth to play. Claudius's nephew was one of the most vicious, dissolute, and perverted tyrants of all time. A psychopath who made himself emperor by slaughtering all his imperial relatives and anyone else who happened to get in the way. A wonderful part, this, for Emlyn Williams.
Yes, it was indeed a marvelous part. I've just been refreshing my memory. As a matter of fact, I had worked for Corder already, oddly enough, with Merle, too, and Robert Durnat. It was Merle's second picture, I think, and my second picture, and Robert's first, in a film called Men of Tomorrow, about 5 years before this. And for the year or two before the I, Claudius, I'd been in my own play, Night Must Fall, in London, and during it, Corder asked me to supper with him, which was very flattering, in his flat, and we talked, and he said he would like to do, or to hear any ideas I had on any films I wanted to do, and we talked at length about a film about Nijinsky, which I'd always wanted to do, and that I should write it and play it, and also a film that I was very interested in, the idea of a film about the Rattenbury murder case for Merle and for Laurence Olivier. But things, as so often happens, changed, and I went to America with my play, and all that sort of came apart. When I came back, I was rung up by my agent to play Caligula, and I suppose as I had been spending the last 2 years lugging a hat box around with in it a woman's head, I suppose I was considered not bad casting for this little part.
Flora Robson, who in her younger days seemed condemned to play elderly character parts, was to play her oldest one yet, the 80-year-old Livia, widow of Emperor Augustus and grandmother of Claudius. When we called on von Sternberg and Merle Oberon, Dame Flora Robson was also nearby, in Hollywood, working on a John Ford picture for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. She was staying in the home of her friend, the actor John Abbott.
I was then under contract to Sir Alexander Corder, and a little disturbed because I got so many very difficult character parts to play. I had just played Queen Elizabeth I of England, in which my clothes were so tremendously heavy. One dress weighed 200 pounds, and walking up and down those long corridors, I finished panting for breath in the middle of this. I also had a false nose and rather heavy crowns on my head, which would press into my head to make my head ache. This one, I played the old Empress Livia Augustus, who was over 80, and I had the most difficult makeup. I had cotton wool pads put here to make my eyes very baggy, and they used to pour collodion, kind of new skin, over this to make it stick on, and this was very hot, and my whole face was covered with liquid rubber. The clothes weren't too heavy, I don't think, but in order to get to this age, and then I was in my early 30s, I developed a sort of palsy and used to twitch with my mouth to make myself seem much older than I was.
I was Alex Corder's special script girl, or continuity, for years, and as such I was in charge of the continuity on I, Claudius. You may wonder what on earth I'm doing sitting in this terrible derelict old room, but actually I'm in one of the rooms of what was the mansion of Denham Fisheries. And years ago, when we made this film, about 28 years ago I think it was, when the filming was taking place in the studios at the other end of the ground, this old house was the production headquarters. Alex's own office was actually in the room above the one that I'm sitting in. It's very sad and rather nostalgic to go up there now and see all the broken glass and the plaster peeling off the walls. But in those days, when it was all beautifully furnished, Alex used to sit at his desk up there, and it was from that desk, looking out onto the beautiful scene of the trees and the water that you can see from the window, it was there that Alex planned this film, which was to be the best film he'd ever made, I, Claudius.
I was 16 at the time and an art student at Chelsea Polytechnic studying scenic design, which is how I started in this business anyway. And already people were talking about the fantastic sets at Denham. And I was fortunate enough to go down myself and see them. And they were fantastic. Corder's brother, Vincent, designed the sets. And in the huge new studios at Denham, which had been specially built for Corder, an army of craftsmen were recreating the palaces, the Senate House, and the temples of ancient Rome in all their splendor. So the cast was lined up, the script finished, and von Sternberg was almost ready to start shooting. The lighting cameraman was the late Georges Perrinal, one of the world's greatest photographers. On February the 15th, 1937, von Sternberg walked onto the set and began to shoot the epic that was to be Corder's biggest, most lavish picture. We're going to see the rushes exactly as they were shot, and now shown for the first time. Members of the imperial family are arriving for the ceremonies deifying the late Emperor Augustus, who had ruled for 45 years and now was to be made a god by order of the Senate. The voice shouting instructions is von Sternberg's. Flora Robson, as the ancient Empress Livia, widow of Augustus, arrives first.
All right, go ahead, take your position. Litter, come on.
Next to arrive is the villainous nephew of Claudius, Emlyn Williams, as Caligula.
Right, cheer!
I don't remember having a makeup test for the part, which was odd, which meant that I only met the director on my first day of shooting, which was a Roman orgy starting at 6:30 in the morning on a January or February day and ending at 6:30 at night. I was introduced to him, and he took me aside and was extremely polite and said, this part, you know, is a very cruel, degenerate man. And I said, yes, I see that. He said, perhaps so degenerate, perhaps a little bit sissy, not too much. And I was glad of that, because I had my fittings for the costumes, which looked to me a little bit like, I think, 2 hostess gowns I was going to wear, and a couple of short cocktail numbers, and a false fringe. And so I had said to myself, watch out.
He's the vilest, most despicable little reptile that the gods ever created. He's unscrupulous, dishonest.
Vain, spiteful, lecherous, and cruel. You flatter me.
Enough, be silent.
Say the last thing again and turn your face. Just the last line, cueing him.
He's unscrupulous, dishonest.
That's right.
Can I have it again, sorry?
He's unscrupulous, dishonest.
Vain, spiteful, lecherous, and cruel. You flatter me.
Enough, be silent.
Usually, of course, the one person who never appears in front of the camera is the director. But on one rare occasion, at the end of a scene with Flora Robson, just before the camera was switched off, Sternberg comes into shot.
When is the full moon, Thrasillus?
Tonight, Lady Livia.
Ted, print that. Fine. That's fine, and it's just Emmeline.
I remember being quite excited the first day on the set to see a great director from Hollywood. He always alarmed me a little bit. He was a bearded man who, I think he was the last of the film directors who dressed up for the part. He used to wear sometimes riding breeches with laced-up boots and a big sort of shooting jacket with very large pockets and a sort of silk turban round his head. Other days he'd come in a silk dressing gown, but it was those high boots I first was very surprised about, but something different every day.
Despite the difficulties I had with some of the actors, and Mr. Laughton in particular, he was magnificent in several of the scenes, and he more than made up for the scenes which were not very good, but which would pass. And he particularly, I remember one scene where he walks down after arriving in a litter and was very satisfactory in everything he did.
Right, action!
Uncle Claudius! Uncle Claudius! What will the king do without you, Uncle? We're going to be to the girls when they get back home. Don't forget the goat!
I don't think I had any trouble with anyone, with the exception of Laughton, who had some difficulty in getting into his part.
I had worked with Charles. Well, I didn't work with him because I did my little bit in Henry VIII 2 days before, after he finished the picture. But he was always so nice to me. As a matter of fact, the first day's shooting, when we were all in our costumes and taking publicity stills, I looked at some of the other girls and I thought they looked so pretty with all their natural curly hair, and here was I with my very straight Anne Boleyn hair and the headdress, and I mumbled something about going up and making my hair all curly, and Charles said to me, "You dare, and I'll kill you." And really rather a sad experience, because I know and knew and respected Charles as a great actor, and suddenly something very, very odd happened to him. He would come on the set every day and get made up and get dressed, and then say he couldn't find his character, and break down. And many a time he'd come into my dressing room where I'd be made up, ready to go on the set, and put his head in my lap and cry. And I felt so sorry for him, because I knew he wasn't doing it on purpose. But this went on and on and on. I don't know, it seemed like forever. I don't know how long it did go on. But we were delivered by a most unfortunate thing to me, an accident. I had a motor car accident. And so they canceled the picture, and Lloyd's had to pay up a great deal of money.
Asiaticus, stand up. Not only are you a stuffed and puffed up...
Not only are you a profiteer, but...
Not only are you a profiteer, but since we're dealing in personalities, you're a stuffed and puffed up glutton. You'd sell your soul for the tail end of an anchovy. Since no one else seems eager to show his eloquence, I will inform you the conditions upon which I will accept your support. I'm sorry, I've gone. Since no one else seems eager to show his eloquence, that's the wrong word. What? My Lord Sentius, I did not know you could also stutter. I thought your talents were confined to neighing like a horse. Is there anyone else who wishes to call attention to my misfortunes? That's the broadest East End Cockney I've ever heard in my life.
In fact, day after day, he used to arrive at the studio and say, "I can't find the man, Joe. I can't get the man." And he had the idea that perhaps if he started on a different sequence, he could work himself into the film. And so, as at that time we were the only film company filming at Denham, we built stage after stage on each of the many, set after set on each of the many stages in the studios. And each day we'd start on a different sequence and hope that Charles would perhaps find the man. And then one day he arrived breathless and rather late on the set, very excited, and came up and said, "Joe, I've got the man. I've found him. Don't you realize it's Edward VIII?" And he got hold of a gramophone record of Edward VIII's abdication speech to the nation. And thereafter, he would never film until he'd first of all retired to his dressing room, which was a caravan on the set, and played through Edward's last speech as king to the nation. And after he'd heard it through, Charles would come and try and play his part of Claudius in the film.
The public, thank heavens, never knows the private agonies actors sometimes have to go through. Sternberg had a wonderful visual sense. He liked huge sets when working on a grand scale, and Claudius gave him enormous scope. He was never a man to do things by halves. But sometimes matters are inclined to get a bit out of hand. And other people found they had problems too. Like John Armstrong, Corder's costume designer.
One morning, he asked me, "Have we any Vestal Virgins?" I said yes. He said, "How many?" I said 6, which was the authentic number. He said, "How were they dressed?" I got him my drawing, which I took from a statue in Naples. They were well covered with clothing, with a kind of tiara on their heads. A lure was not allowed. In fact, they were buried alive if they broke their vows of chastity. He looked at the drawing and said, "This won't do for me. I want 60, and I want them naked." He defined naked, bra and pants under a veil, and he said, "I want them on the set tomorrow morning." There was no arguing. I went off to London to hold a parade of extras to choose the girls, while the wardrobe set out to cut 60 circles of 5-foot radius out of scenic gauze. Next morning, the Vestal Virgins duly appeared on the set, diaphanous, holding tapers, and arranged up a magnificent flight of steps in the temple scene. It looked lovely, but it had nothing to do with the Roman religion.
Every director requires a different service from his script-girl because they all work quite differently. Von Sternberg was a first-class cutter, and he always knew exactly which section of every angle he was going to use and exactly where he was going to cut it. I really first discovered what a brilliant cutter von Sternberg was and how he edited the film in his mind before he ever started to shoot, when on the first 2 Sundays during production, 3 of us worked in the cutting rooms with von Sternberg as his assistants while he started to edit the film which we had already taken. You can still see those old cutting rooms. They were, in fact, the stables of this very house. But like this old house, they're now in just the same terrible state of dilapidation. We went and had a look at them this afternoon. And I shall never forget those Sundays winding and unwinding all those thousands of feet of film while the 3 of us tried to keep pace with von Sternberg, who cut the material at a most prodigious rate.
Uncle Claudius! Uncle Clock, 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 clock! What will the pigs do without you, Uncle? Prepare the pigs for the cows when you get back home.
How wonderful to see you again, dear Uncle Claudius. I thought you were on your farm.
I was
You were ordered to attend. I hear that you're teaching your pigs to read. Is that true?
My pigs, why?
So as to have readers for all the Roman histories you write.
Stop that rebel laughing.
Grandmother, you remember my dear Uncle Claudius, who prefers the society of pigs to that of the court?
I have asked Claudius to be present at these ceremonies and to be my guest at dinner tonight.
But Grandmother, think of his table manners.
Be silent, you impudent puppy. You take your uncle for a fool, but he's not. I sometimes think he pretends to be one so as to make fools of us. Far from being a fool, he's the last decent man left alive in Rome. One can rely on him. If he makes a promise, he keeps it. And when he swears to the truth, it is the truth. Am I right, Claudius?
Don't let him start talking. He might have a stroke.
And you, Claudius, you think this nephew of yours a harmless buffoon, but I know better. He's the vilest, most despicable little reptile the gods ever created. He's unscrupulous, dishonest.
Vain, spiteful, lecherous, and cruel. You flatter me.
Enough, be silent.
I shall remember, Uncle, that you are not quite so stupid as you would like me to believe you are.
An unpleasant youth.
Be careful of him, Claudius. He's the next emperor of Rome. That old charlatan has read the stars, and he also predicts, and that's why I sent for you, Claudius, that I haven't much longer to live. When is the full moon, Thrasylus?
Tonight, Lady Livia.
He claims the full moon will see my death. If he's wrong, I'll have him killed. If he's right, I'll take him with me. I can use a clever old vulture like that, even in death.
The quality and the splendor of that still survives after nearly 30 years. This indeed was an epic in the making. Now, here's another scene. This time in the Senate, in which Caligula, who's just made himself emperor, is indulging in an orgy of megalomania.
Right, action.
After a great deal of deliberation, I have been commissioned by my colleagues to ask the Senate to vote 50 gold pieces to every soldier in our glorious army, the same to be distributed at once.
The treasury is empty, and unless the honored senator has the amount required concealed on his generous person, the army must continue to serve for patriotic reasons alone.
Enough of this oratory. Fill the treasury, invent new taxes. I want the army paid.
Impossible, Caesar. The Roman people are already taxed beyond endurance.
Are the married people taxed? No, well then tax them. Tax the single. Tax those that have children and those that have not. Tax those who ride and those that go on foot. Tax those that have doors and windows, and tax those that haven't any.
I don't think it will be necessary to take extreme measures. I propose that we double the existing taxes. The people will not complain at having to pay for the privilege of being ruled by so profound a thinker as the illustrious Caligula.
I could not have expressed such lofty sentiments better myself.
I knew that the Senate would find a way out of the present difficulty, and I have therefore prepared to reward it. I now honor this noble house by appointing incitatus, the greatest racehorse in the empire, a member of the Senate. Well, why does nobody greet him? Who's the older senator? Up on your feet and welcome him.
That's better. Bascom, I still get it in.
I've always felt really very sorry for that horse, because there's never been an entrance in any film for man or beast as much built up to as this one, as you've just seen. And you hear the horse's hoofs off, the horse was there, and because of an accident, the scene was never completed, and as far as we know, that poor horse is still waiting to come on. I do remember that day vividly, because it was my last day. I didn't know it, but it was my last day, and I was standing around, as you've just seen, and waiting to go on, and one of the stagehands was standing there next to the horse. It was dying to go on, and the director was standing not very far away in his costume, and this member of the crew turned to me and said, "You know, if you put old Joe on that nag, you know, he might win the Grand National next month." That was the last day.
And now Laughton again. Claudius found life less nerve-wracking and certainly a good deal safer, well away from the plotting and the throat-slitting that was going on in Rome. And so he lived quietly on his farm at Capua. And then one day, he sent for his doctor.
We've been waiting for hours, Doctor.
Is your master ill?
You know he cares little for his own health, sir. Don't be angry with him. He sent for you to cure one of his pigs.
I could never be angry with Claudius. What's wrong with the pig? Surely he has pigs enough?
It's the runt of the litter, Doctor. It's a little one, weak and stunted and almost blind. There's one like that in every litter.
And that's the one your master loves, eh, Narcissus? Let me see the little patient. Claudius, bad news, that's why I'm late. Rome's a madhouse. Tiberius has been dead for a week and no one knew.
Who's emperor?
Caligula. They say that he choked Tiberius to death with a pillow and tore the ring from his finger even before he'd stopped breathing.
Caligula, emperor.
His soldiers tear people out of their homes in the darkness of the night. It's fortunate we live in the country, Claudius. Who knows Caligula's blacklist?
How long have you been my slave, Narcissus?
9 years, Master.
You're free now.
I don't want to leave you, Master. Let me stay with you.
Are you on Caligula's blacklist? Then there's still time for you to flee. It'll be months before your turn. You can easily leave.
My speech and my foot would betray me anywhere. Besides, why shouldn't Rome's misfortunes be mine?
My lord Claudius, you're to proceed directly to the Hall of Justice.
What do you want with him? He's never harmed a fly.
We're not here to judge him, but to arrest him.
I'm his doctor. He's ill.
Not ill enough. My orders are to bring Claudius or his body.
What are you going to do?
I'm more frightened than I thought I'd be. should we not see each other again, look after my home and the little runt.
I'm a bad friend, Claudius. I can do more for that little pig than I can for you. Come on.
Have I been here long?
7 days since the Emperor became ill. He must be feeling better now that he's asking for you.
Uncle Claudius, where have you been? Go in at once. He's asking for you. But be careful. He's in a dreadful state.
Who's in there?
Muser, his doctor. He's kept him in a room without any fresh air for a week. It's impossible to breathe in there.
What does he want with me?
I don't know, but whatever it is, humour him. Because if you don't, he'll kill you. He's got a sword. Thinks he's become a god. He's mad. He always was, but now he's worse than mad. He's possessed.
Ah, my Lord Claudius, I hope you're well. Is that old quack Xenophon still treating you?
He's my best friend.
I think I could cure that stutter of yours. Do you still limp?
I limp with my tongue and stutter with my leg. Nature never quite finished me.
I could cure that limp of yours, too. I've a method of breaking bones in several places and resetting them. I've become rich and famous, Claudius, and don't need clients. But for 1,000 gold pieces, I could cure you of all your ills.
Thank you, Doctor. I was born a battlefield of disease. I nearly died 3 times before I was 2 years old, and besides the usual ration measles, which made my left ear slightly deaf, I had malaria, erysipelas, and colitis. I also acquired with apparent ease infantile paralysis, which shortened my left leg. And in the last few years after eating, I have an appalling pain in the pit of my stomach, but I shall be pleased to remain as I am if I get out of that room alive.
Down on your knees. How dare you remain standing in my presence?
I'm on duty, Caesar, and a soldier cannot kneel and guard his emperor at the same time.
You insolent fool. Down on your knees! Now get out.
It's good to see you're better, Caesar.
I haven't been ill. I'm simply undergoing a change. It's the most momentous transformation that any human being has ever achieved. A prophecy is about to be fulfilled. I am being reborn.
I hope your condition is not too painful.
It is painful to be one's own mother. Well, idiot! Can't you see any change in me?
I was blind not to see it instantly. You're no longer human. May I be the first to worship you as a...
It took you a long time to perceive that I'm no longer human.
Have mercy, I was overcome. I've only been used to the pigs.
My first act as God shall be one of clemency. I sent for you because I wish to put an end to your career as an historian. You might write something I didn't like, but we shall postpone your death until tomorrow.
Print that. That's very good.
I don't know how much Edward VIII had to do with that. And alas, we can't ask Laughton. But I think that in that sequence, although Williams has the dominant part and position, it's Laughton you watch because of this extraordinary sense of humility and shame, underlying which is this wonderful sense of humanity and humor, and strength too. Perhaps these were the very qualities that Laughton found in Edward VIII. One doesn't know. Anyway, in the next scene, we find out why Caligula had decided to postpone the death sentence on Claudius. It takes place in Caligula's palace, just after Messalina has performed a dance specially arranged by Caligula himself.
Isn't she fantastically beautiful?
Fantastically beautiful.
Just as you, my dear uncle, are fantastically ugly. What do you think of him, Messalina? Just look at him. He's more dead than alive. He's only waiting for me to find an interesting way to kill him. But does he fear death? No, he just squats there trembling with your beauty. Isn't that so, Claudius?
How can one conceal anything from the gods?
Claudius, I've decided. You shall die an exquisite death.
How? My God and my master.
Messalina, how would you like to marry Claudius?
My family have other plans.
What plans?
I'm promised in marriage to another.
Who?
Valens.
Valens?
He's no one of importance. He's a captain of your bodyguard.
So you don't wish to marry Claudius, Messalina?
No, Caesar.
Get up. Claudius, I condemn you to die through the hands of a beautiful woman. To kill an ugly old man with a young wife. That's my decision. This union should be an event for all Rome. Eh, Senator? And for the medical profession, Doctor. An old idiot and a young dancer. A remote descendant of Julius Caesar married to a remote descendant of Augustus. What do you think the result will be?
A pair of crutches.
You Caesars own you how stupid your jealousies are. Come now, you two. Embrace. Give me a sample of your affection. Behold, I am generous as only a god could be. I sentence you to death, Claudius, in the most beautiful possible away.
Well, when eventually his mad nephew, Caligula, had killed off practically everyone remaining and was himself murdered by one of his captains, the soldiers found Claudius hiding behind a curtain, and they recognized he was their old boozing chum. You see, he was a good guy. He was a good scout, and so they, instead of having anyone else forced on them by the Senate, they said, "He's our emperor."
My two captors pushed their way through the crowd, dragging me behind them. Gratus called out, "Hey, Sergeant, look whom we have here. Bit of luck, I think. It's old Claudius." "What's wrong with old Claudius for emperor? The best man for the job in Rome, though he do limp and stammer a bit."
161, deck 6.
Right. Gentlemen, the suggestion that we improve the election of a half-wit is an insult to this distinguished assembly.
Before we adjourn for dinner, may I be permitted to point out that the proposed emperor has one leg shorter than the other? And may I also draw your attention to the fact that this leg being shorter is probably responsible for the other leg being longer?
Senators, the cause of the Roman Empire could find no better champion than Claudius. I am ready to stand at his side.
Whether the Senate endorses our choice or not, I'm afraid it will be compelled to accept it.
Are you out of your senses? You freed us from the tyranny of a madman, only to deliver us into the hands of a stuttering idiot? We'd become the laughingstock of the whole world if we accept this dummy as emperor.
My lords, I respect the constitutional rights of this noble house and would only accept the acclamation of the army if this noble house elects me
Emperor.
My Lord Sentius, I did not know you could also stutter. I thought your talents were confined to neighing like a horse. Is there anyone else who wishes to call attention to my misfortunes? Or shall I call attention to yours? Sentius, get up. Not only are you a pompous ass and a hypocrite, but you have acquired your position through bribery. Asiaticus, stand up. Not only are you a profiteer, but since we're dealing in personalities, you're a stuffed and puffed up glutton. You'd sell your soul for the tail end of an anchovy. Silius, get up. You're rarely heard and your name is never mentioned, but you control the Senate with gold accumulated by providing worthless grain to the people and faulty supplies to the army. Since no one else seems eager to show his eloquence, I will inform you of the conditions upon which I will accept your support. I, Claudius, will tell you how to frame your laws. Profiteering and bribery will stop.
the Senate will function only in the name of Roman justice. And all of you who have acquired position dishonestly will be replaced by men who love Rome better than their purses. I will break everything rotten in this Senate like an old dry twig. On that basis only will I become your emperor. Now let me hear your objections. Now I will give the army the terms on which I will accept. Caligula was murdered. He ruled by force, but a state such as I hope to establish cannot condone murder. For violence is an enemy to justice. And in the name of justice, I call upon the murderers of Caligula to step forward.
We killed a tyrant, Caesar.
But you broke your solemn oaths as Roman soldiers to protect your emperor. You didn't strike for your country. You killed in the name of your own private grudges. I was with you, Cassius, when the tyrant kicked you, but you were not content with one single murder. You caused the death of Caligula's wife and of hundreds at the palace. What fate do you consider you deserve?
Death, Claudius.
For that answer, I will take your families under my protection. But for the crime of murder, I must sentence you, Cassius, and you, Lupus, to death. I will call upon the army to have that sentence executed.
I think personally that this is one of the most moving, beautiful, and powerful speeches I've ever seen on a screen. It ranks in greatness and splendor, to my mind, with Olivia's Crispin Day speech in Henry V, and on another plane it has the humor and the honesty and the pain of Judy Garland's dressing room scene in A Star is Born. Laughton here proves that he was kissed with genius. And I'm not in the least surprised that he went through such agony and despair in bringing Claudius alive to the screen, because to me, in that scene, Claudius is alive, and resurrection is never easy.
He's one of the people who you could really apply the word genius to. It's a very difficult word to really live up to. When Charles was at his best, it was something that well, everybody knows that. It's never, no other actor can quite do it the way he does it. And of course he was difficult. Anybody like that is difficult. He was a child. He was a brilliantly gifted child who had this instinct for acting. He had a complex about his appearance. He was a brilliantly natural, instinctive actor, but he wanted to rationalize his performances. He wanted to feel that he really was governing them with his intelligence. And an actor's intelligence is not the same as any other person's. an intelligent actor, is a fine actor, and he should have left that alone and just acted, but he wanted reassuring. And in this case, I know that he went to see Mr. Sternberg, I beg his pardon, Mr. von Sternberg in hospital, and gave him grapes. But it looks to me as if when they got onto the studio floor that Mr. von Sternberg didn't give Charles very much. What Charles needed was sun, and all he got, it seems to me, was frost.
And destiny, perhaps fortunately for our peace of mind, is unpredictable. Almost exactly a month after shooting began on this picture, the blow fell.
I was going for a fitting, I remember now. And I had this rather wild chauffeur. And every time we'd try to make a street crossing, and I'd wonder if we were going to make it this time. Well, this time we didn't. And the next thing I knew was I was sort of coming to on a pavement, surrounded by people. I didn't know where I was, but I could hear the people saying, "It's Merle Oberon, it's Merle Oberon." And then I'd go out again and keep coming back and going. And the next thing I knew, I was in the emergency ward being sewn up. And one of the surgeons said to me, "What's your name?" And having heard it on the street, I said, "Merle Oberon." And he said, "Oh, come off it." And it's rather sweet, because he came up to me a few days later and he said, "I must apologize." He said, "You see, a lot of people come into emergency and they imagine they're all kinds of people."
We waited for a little while and then decided to shelve the project.
They used to tease me after and say that every time I had a cold, the bell would ring at Lloyd's.
Actually, it was quite a disappointment to me, because I thought that Claudius would have made a very fine film. And in considering the events that led up to the close of Claudius, I was rather sorry that actors had truncated my film. There was no way of replacing Merle Oberon.
Actors had truncated my film. Well, that sounds as if an actor or actress had come in deliberately and willfully and just destroyed this product. But actually, the person who really was nearly truncated was poor Merle, being thrown through that windscreen, which was the real accident that finished the whole thing. And the other thing is, Merle could not be replaced. I do know that if the film had been going absolutely wonderfully and was going to be the greatest success in the world for everybody concerned with it at that moment, and I had been in that taxi and gone through the windscreen, even though I'd shot all this stuff, I know that they would have replaced me. The accident was an accident, but it was a godsend. It was obvious that Charles was terribly unhappy, Sternberg was unhappy, Corder was unhappy, and Merle wasn't unhappy, but you know, she was unhappy. She was in hospital, and it really was a very lucky chance once one was sure that Merle was all right. So much so that last year I remember meeting Merle in New York, and we were discussing this, oddly enough, and I said it was such a godsend in a way that, are you sure it wasn't Alex dressed up as a chauffeur driving the car? And she said, of course, wicked. But, and of course it couldn't be, because there she was in hospital, poor girl. But I'm sure that once they realized that beautiful face of Merle's, which was cut, was not going to be permanently damaged, I think they all sent her flowers, heaved a sigh of relief, and said, cut.
The rushes were terrific. They said it would have been von Sternberg's greatest film, and certainly what I saw of Laughton and Robson and Merle Oberon was terrific. But a beautiful dream has ended because Claudius just didn't want it. He keeps his dignity. He doesn't want to be shown, his imperial face to be shown on the screen. He didn't mind books being written about him, but he didn't want to be portrayed, even by Charles Laughton. Nothing came of it. Nothing perhaps ever will come of it. But Claudius is having a quiet smile somewhere about it.
I wonder if that's really going to be the end of I, Claudius, or if someone else will make another attempt at it. Robert Graves is so certain, so sure that Claudius doesn't want to be portrayed, but I wonder if he's right. I'm only wondering, really, because of something Claudius himself says at the very beginning of the book. It is addressed to posterity, yet my hope is that you, my eventual readers of 100 generations ahead or more, will feel yourselves spoken to, as if by a contemporary, as often Herodotus and Thucydides, long dead, seem to speak to me.